Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel with today a new video where we are going to talk about clean architecture. So I know this video has been long requested in the comments and I'm finally making it, moving it a little bit ahead of time because you've been so many to actually request that, and I can understand and I see why, because if you're starting Flutter and you looked at the different videos that I've made earlier, you're just bombarded inside this architecture that is a bit complex at first, and maybe you don't understand it super good. So the goal with today's video is really to walk you through why first I'm using this kind of architecture and why you should as well try to inspire yourself either to create the same kind of architecture, perhaps make it your own later on when you're more comfortable with it. So the goal today is really that. If you like what's happening on the channel, guys, and I wanted to actually thank you a lot for the 500 subscribers mark that we hit yesterday or something like this. It's been like a little bit over a month that I'm making video on this channel, and the feedback has just been amazing. So like I wanted to thank you again for that. And yeah, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like on this video to keep this channel growing, keep the community growing. I'm actually, little side note, working on a Discord where we are going to be able to communicate more easily all together and help out each other in our different projects. So that's underway. Don't worry, guys, it's coming as well. So let's go back to the video. Clean architecture. So what you need to know with the clean architecture. So if we open VS Code and there is no projects created yet, nothing, you will end up right here, okay? So the goal is we are going to create a new dummy Flutter project, and I'm going to walk you through what I believe is the best kind of architecture that you should be using in your project. So if you want to create a new project, you're just going to go ahead and create just that. And we're just going to create a new application like this. And we're going to name it Clean Architecture. It's just for me to remember what it is. So you are redirected to a blank Flutter application with basically nothing to it. There is really nothing to it right here. So you want to actually divide your code. The goal with the clean architecture is to be able to understand and go back to your code later on in time. Because if you're developing projects right now only for yourself, perhaps for school or some other projects like this, but on a very small scale, let's say you're alone or maybe 1-2 person to develop it, that's fine. You can use any kind of type of architecture and you'll end up be okay, because well, you've built it, it's not scalable so much, and it's not going to be maintainable a lot over time. So that there is no need of a very clean, powerful architecture. You might think that, but actually it is, because later on, if you want to come back to your code, let's say in a year, in 2 years, well, you might have a very hard time understanding what you created right here if everything is embedded at the same place, right? So you really want, and I encourage you to go look as well the block video that I've made, because this architecture depends on the kind of state management software that you're going to use, right? Because here we have the UI, which is one block. We have the, let's say, state management, which is going to be block or getX or whatever you're using, riverpod, whatever. And then you're going to have your backend, right? And the goal is to have all of those different things separated, but not only just separated inside the lib folder and just well organized and all this. I want it to be really well separated. And that's why every time I'm creating a new project, every time I'm dealing with backends, I'm going on the left, on the root of my project, and I'm actually creating a new folder all the time that I called packages. And under this folder, I'm going to create repositories for my backend, right? So I'm going to have a user repository. I'm going to have a event repository, I don't know, a payment repository, Algolia repository, and all of these repository are going to deal with calls to the backend regarding this specific aspect of my app. So if I have user repository, inside this repository, I'm going to have the user class, the user model, but as well all of my calls to Firebase for user management, getting the user data, logging, sign up the user, modifying the profile picture, all of that is going to be under the user repository. If let's say I'm creating a e-commerce app, I'm going to have as well another repository that I'm going to call, for instance, payment. Okay. And under this payment repository, I'm going to have my payment class, and I'm going to have all my operation, perhaps with Stripe or something like this, where I'm going to actually do the payment. So that's a very big separation inside a block, which is the backend block. Okay. I'm separating again all of the different types of calls that I'm going to have, right? And so you might think, right, so what's a repository looks like? Okay, so let's create one together. Let's say we have a user repository. Okay, so we're going to create a user repo ztory. Okay. And under this user repository, what's really interesting is I'm going to create another perspect.yaml file. And why would I even try to do that? Because I have one right here. Well, the thing is, I may need packages dealing for the user backend that I don't need inside my main app, right? For my UI and my state management. Perhaps, let's say Firebase Firestore, right? For my database. I need to access my database inside this user repository, but I have no need of these packages, of this package, in, for instance, inside my main perspect.yaml file. In the UI, I don't need to call my database because all of the calls are going to be done right here. And that's true for Firebase Firestore, but whatever package you may need strictly for this particular backend item, you can create them right here. So under this user repository, if you create a perspect.yaml file, and that's very cool because it's really separating everything. So for your perspect.yaml file, what you want to do is copy what you have in your main perspect.yaml file. So you're sure you have the same kind of data. And here, the name, you're going to name it the name of your package itself. All right. So here is the name would be user repository. The description would be what? Would be a package that deals with users. Okay. Publish to none. This is good because this means that the package is not going to be published anywhere inside the pub.dev website or something like this. And just like that, you can just go ahead and save that. And this is going to generate a few files because every time that you're creating a perspect.yaml file, it's going to create different kind of files, right? And under this user repository, I have now all of those different files with my perspect.yaml file. So you can see better. I'm going to create a new folder, and let's say I'm going to call it payments repository. Repository. All right, so under the packages folder, I have two repositories, one that deals with the user, okay, the user repository, and one that deals with the payment repository. We're not going to implement the payments repository because it would be kind of the same architecture as the user repository. So let's go ahead and do the entire architecture for this user repository. So under the user repository, under the user repository, you're going to create a new folder and you're going to call it lib, okay? And this basically takes out the same kind of model that you would see when you generate a new project, right? When you create a new Flutter project, you have all of those different files and you have this lib folder into the files right there. And this is basically what we're going to do right here because we're creating a lib folder. And under this lib folder, we are actually going to have a different kind of stuff. We want first to have a new file that we're going to call user repository.dart, okay? And this file, okay, is going to be the one that will be exporting all of the different files that we need in order for us to be using this package into our main lib folder, okay? I hope you understood what I meant because it's a very important step, okay? So I will repeat it later on, but that's fine. So under the lib folder, we as well want to create another folder that's called source, okay? And under the source folder, we're gonna create another folder, call it entities. And I'm gonna go ahead and explain what entities and models are for. Entities, models, and then you want to create two files right here, okay? A first file that you're going to call user repo.dart, for instance, and another file that you're going to call Firebase user repo.dart. Okay. And under models, you want to create a new file that you'll call models.dart, okay? And you will create a new file that you'll call user.dart. That would be a class that you could create. And under entities, you're going to create entities.dart, and you're going to create a new other file that you will call user_entity.dart. Okay. And just like that, you have the entire architecture for the user repository. Okay. So you have it fully extended right here on the left. Okay. I hope it's big enough. I can't make my editor bigger than that. So what do you want to do here? So you have this user repository. Okay. If we go down the scale, this user repository file here, and this is going to be library, and you're going to call it user repository. Okay. So that's the library that you will export in your paspec.yaml file, your main file, okay? And this is very important because you're creating kind of your own package, okay? You're creating kind of your own package dedicated to this specific task. If you go ahead and go in your main paspec.yaml file, if you want to use what you're going to create under this user repository, you'll need to import this package that you just created, right? And because it's a custom package, well, you just want to do it like so. So right here under dependencies, okay, you're going to create, perhaps I can say right here, custom dependencies, okay? And you're going to create here user repository, okay? Repository. I have some very big problems. That's fine. And then you're going to do path and give the path of the repository. So here it's packages, okay? Packages / user repository, okay? Packages user repository. And if you save that, everything is going to work perfect, okay? And from now on, you're going to access this file right here, okay? And that's why it's important in this file to export all of the different like files that you want, okay? So you want to export right here, say export, and you want to export source entities.dart. You want to export source models.dart. You want to export as well source / user repo.dart, and finally source / Firebase user repo.dart. Those are the files that you want to export all the time. So the names of the two first will never change, right? Because if you expand source and navigate under entities and models, those two files right here, okay, they're all the time gonna export. If you take the entities file, it's gonna export user entity.dart, okay, save. And if I have another model, another class right here that it's not a user class, it's a user immutable class and user immutable entity, I will create them right here, and then I will export them in those files as well, so I don't have so many imports everywhere in other files. I can just import entities and I will have all of them, okay? And you can do the same for models. Export, and you want to export user.dart, okay? You can save that. So that's pretty much it. What are the difference between models, okay, and entities? So the models is the class itself, okay? It's the class that you will want to use inside your app. So if you have a user, perhaps we can create a quick class. You create your my user class, okay? And here you're gonna have, well, let's say you're gonna have a string ID and string email. That's it, okay? Well, you want to actually, in this class, perhaps you want to, let's say, have this class inside your Firestore database, right? You might want to actually put this class into Firestore, okay? But if you want to put this class in Firestore, you can't just put it as is, because Firestore can't take this object parameter. Firestore always takes a map, okay? And a map is very simple. What's a map? A map, it's something like this with a string that would say ID and that would pass on the ID parameter, right? That would say email and that would pass on the email parameter, okay? That's a map, okay? That's a map of type string, and here is a string and a string. So it's a map of string, okay? But you can have different types. If you have, I don't know, create it at, which is a datetime, you can as well do that. And datetime is something that is accepted by Firestore, okay? But if you have, for instance, in a class, another reference to another class, right? You will need as well to modify this class as a map in order for Firebase to understand that you want to put something that is the right format for it, okay? So you could here actually get rid of the entire entities stuff and make your methods to transform this my user object onto a map of string, okay? You could do it right here, the to document and from document, to JSON from JSON if you prefer, okay? You could do that right here. I prefer to separate it because it gives me more readability onto what am I actually dealing with, because I have my class here that is going to be used inside the UI all the time, because perhaps I'm navigating to the profile of the user, okay? And I'm going to use this my user information that I have from my database in order to populate my screen, right? I don't care with those to document and from documents methods in my UI. I don't need them, okay? What I need is a very clear class that allows me to do exactly what I want, okay? And that's why I prefer to keep everything separated. The user entity is going to be the one that's going to either take something from the database, so a map from the database, transform it from the map to a my user entity object, and then I'm going to transform the my user entity object onto a my user object, and I'm going to use that in my UI. Okay, you see the circle? It's either I'm having a my user object, okay? The my user object, I'm transforming it to a my user entity object. From this my user entity object, I'm transforming it to a map that's going to then go into the database, okay? That's exactly that. It's really a full circle, and then you go back. So here, if you would like to have this, let's say my user class done, right? You would need to create actually, well, you might want to create other methods, but for that, you want to have a to entity method and a from entity method. So you would want my user entity here and call it to entity. And here, this my user entity is going to return a my user entity class that we're going to create just after, okay? That's going to take as parameter an ID, which is going to be the ID, and it's going to take an email, which is going to be the email, okay? That's it. And that's the to entity method. And the to entity method is taking our my user object and transforming it into a my user entity object. And because they have the same parameters, those two classes, and they are basically sisters, they're working together, everything works fine. Okay, so perhaps you want to create the my user entity class now. So I'm going to copy that, go to my user entity and paste that and name that my user entity. And this is having the same parameter, okay? But you don't need this. And it's having the same parameters as our class right here, okay? And here I want to import my user entity, but here, because we have the entities.dart, I could either import user entity.dart directly, but what I want to do is actually import entities.dart and exactly do that, okay? Straightforward, right? And perhaps I want to do that here in the constructor, so I can actually name my parameters. It's always better to be able to name them, even if it's a little bit more hard work, I would say. It's all the time preferable. So you would have something like this, okay? So you have a my user object to entity, and it's becoming a my user entity object, okay? Then you might want to have as well a from entity object, okay? So you would say static, for instance, my user from entity. it's going to take a parameter that's going to be a my user entity that you can call entity, okay? And this is going to return a my user. And that's going to take an ID, which is entity.id, and it's going to take entity.email, okay? Very straightforward. Okay, so the to entity and from entity here is exactly what we want, because the from entity is gonna be we're gonna give the my user entity this from entity, and then it's gonna give us a my user. Okay, it's really, you see them, they are working together. Okay, and then if you want to finish this kind of trick right here, you would want to have inside your user entity a to document and a from document. Okay, to document is going to be a map, right? String and perhaps dynamic, and you call that to document. And here, what you want to do, because we are having the same parameters, basically, as I told you, they're sister classes, you don't need to give parameters and all stuff like that, because this is going to be just accessible directly from your object. Okay, and you want to return a map, as I told you earlier, saying ID, which is going to be equal to ID, and saying email, that's going to be equal to email. Okay, and that's just it. And then that's exactly that. You're going to have, if I can draw you a little bit, you have a my user object. Okay, you have a my user object. If you want to bring it to the if you want to put data in Firebase, okay, so you have a my user object, you are transforming your my user object to a my user entity object. Okay, and then this my user entity object, you are transforming it to a map, okay, of type string dynamic, for instance, and then database Firebase. Okay, that's exactly it. Let's say your user is signing up, you're creating your class, you're feeding the ID, the email, and all the stuff that you need. Okay, you have a my user object, you're transforming your my user object to a my user entity object, and then you're transforming the my user entity to a map, and then you're sending this map to Firebase. Okay, and that works exactly the same in reverse. Okay, so that's it if you want to put data in Firebase. But if you want to take data from Firebase, if you want to take data from Firebase, well, that's the contrary, right? You're from Firebase, okay? You're getting a map like this of string and dynamic. You want to transform this map onto a my user entity object, and you want to transform this my user entity object to a my user object, and then use it inside your UI. Okay, I hope this is clear enough. Okay, I hope this is clear enough, because this is really the baseline on how you want to create your entire classes. And you might tell me in the comments, right, but it's duplicating the code then, because you have to create all of the time like two classes for actually just one, where you repeat the parameters and it's not optimized and it's long and all this. Right, you're right, it is longer, and perhaps it is a bit heavier duty and taking a bit more space. But first, you have ChatGPT now, so you can create it can create your classes for you. And second, it's really more clear, because you might end up having a big user, a my user class, right, with different methods that you would want, copy with, transforming to another type of object. You want to have perhaps a bigger constructor, some checks and getters and all this kind of stuff. So you might have a big class, and then you would as well have those methods, those to document and from document method. Okay, so let me just comment that. And we've dealt with the to document method, and the from document method is basically the same kind of stuff. You have a static method of type my user entity from document. You're gonna take what? If you followed, you know what we're taking. We're taking a map, right? We're taking a map, string, dynamic, You can take a map, you can take whatever you want here. You can take a document snapshot as well, that works. You can return my user entity right here. And now the ID and the emails, they're actually inside the map, okay? Because Firebase is giving us here a map. So we need to access those parameters. So they are inside doc in the parameter that is called ID, and the email is in the parameter that is called email. And just like that, you have created the most important methods that you'll need to create a dynamic app using Firebase, but whatever it is really, because no database is going to accept an object for putting data. It's always going to require some kind of map or some kind of JSON format for for the data. So you won't ever be able, no matter the service that you're using, be able to just send your object like this onto your backend. So that's pretty much it for the classes. I hope it's a bit more clear on how it works. So let me close that, and that. And now let's just go ahead and just talk about user repo and Firebase user repo. Okay, those two files are working as well together. But here, the only nuance that you will see is that the user repo is actually an abstract class. Okay, so here you would have abstract, and you would create your class like this: abstract class and user repository like this. And here you would have all of your different methods that you would have. So perhaps let's say future that returns a void sign in, okay? And you take a string email as a parameter, okay? So that's the abstract user repository that you would want to use inside your UI, because they are abstract. But now you need to implement this method, okay? So these methods are going to be implemented inside the Firebase user repository class, okay? So here you just want to create a Firebase user repository class, and you say that it's going to implement user repository, okay? And what's already cool here is that you'd see that because it's implementing the user repository class, you have an error that says, right, it's missing an override. And if you just click like this, it's going to create the methods that you have right there. So first, that's nice because it keeps tracks of all of the methods that you're actually using, okay? And you don't miss out on some. And second, here, it adds a layer of protection on your app for sure, okay? But it's really more interesting for you to kind of have this vision of, okay, so here in my abstract class, in my user repository class, I will define all of the class that I need, okay, with the type of returns that I am waiting, the parameters that I'm expecting, okay, but I'm not implementing them. I'm just having it listed like this. And in my Firebase user repo, I'm actually implementing each and every one of them, because this file is going to be very long at the end. If you have a big app, you're going to have a lot of different methods that you will want to do, and all of this file can be over 1,000 line longs, right? Even more if you have a very big user interaction, that can be super long. So that's nice to have another file, which is this user repo.dart file, which keeps tracks of all the methods that you're using, and it allows you to then see more clearly, okay? So that's pretty much it for all those users repository, but all the repositories that you will create inside your app. And you create a payment repository, that's going to be the same. You're not going to have the user class inside it, but you're going to have a payment class with the payment properties, and you're going to have a payment entity as well, and a payment repository, a Firebase payment repository, or whatever service you're using, right? But all of those backends calls are going to be separated, and that's so nice. If you have different teams working on a project, right? You might have people that are working on the payment stuff in your app, and some people that are actually working on the, let's say, the life of the app, right? And they have separate places to work on. So they're not going to interact inside the same files. And that's a huge thing because if you start using GitHubs and all these things, if you're modifying a file two at the same times, you're going to have problems later on when you want to merge everything on. So that is very cool because you can separate it super nicely. So these packages are very nice. And now onto the kind of UI separation that you might want to have, right? So the UI separation is as well very important because it can get very messy very fast, okay? And there is a bunch of different stuff that you can do to make it better and more clear for you, but for everyone, is actually divide your app in like subsections. You have two really big philosophies right here. You have people that will create files and widgets for everything. Like they will, like it's basically going to be a spaghetti because they're going to take out all of the widgets all the time and create just an entire file for the text and for a container and for all this. I find it overkill. I'm okay with having files that are going up to like 500 lines. That's okay, right? Because then you need interaction with the state. You're gonna have to send functions to the parents and all this. So that can be a nightmare very quick. So don't as well make your life hell by forcing yourself to be so clean, okay? So there is a good balance to have right there, okay? So don't separate everything, but as well keep a very good separation so it's not 2,000 lines files. I've been working for companies where I just arrive and the code is just like a big one file, and you're like, right, so now I have to read that and I want to kill myself. So yeah, you have a very sweet spot to find, and you're gonna find it, don't worry, but you have to keep practicing and see what works for you and see what works as well with your team that you're working with. If you're building a team as well, you can be the lead on that and be the lead of implementing good measures for your team to be as efficient as possible. So under the lead folder, what I like to do is always create an app.dart file, create a app view.dart file, and yeah, that's it. Main app and app view. Okay. So in the main.dart file, I'll only have this. I'll only have my main function because here the main function is super simple, but sometimes you want to do several stuff inside the main function and it can get messy very fast. So I want to have it separate because I mean it's the entry point of your app right here. So you want it to have separate. It's okay. It's fine. It has its own file. Then in the app.dart, I'm actually creating the main app stateless widget, okay? So I'm needing to import material, okay? And here is not actually where I am creating my material app, okay? It's not where I'm creating it. Here, I am actually creating all of my repository provider for my entire app, okay? So because you want to have sometimes access to repository in your entire app, you want to actually define them at the very root, at the very top. Because if you're not defining them at the very root of your application, you won't be able to call them later on in the tree, in the navigation tree. Okay, so you want it to be separated. Okay, so here I would have not a material app, but let's say I can perhaps copy this. I would have a multi-block repository like this. Okay, and I need to import a block, for instance, for that. Let's just import block for the sake of it. Up under dependencies, just gonna import block so we don't have errors. But yeah, he's not happy. Okay, tick. Flutter block. It's Flutter block that I should have imported. My bad. Let me get it. Flutter block. Let's take this one. Is just for the sake of it. And because I really prefer block for state management, I'm always doing that, okay? So here we're gonna have some errors because I didn't create it, the authentication block, right? But here, for instance, I want to access the authentication block throughout my entire app. Okay, so I'm just going to paste it right here. And then the child is going to be my app view. Okay, and the app view is going to be right this widget right here, stateless widget, my app view. And this is where I return my material app. Okay. So that's exactly the thing. And here in my main app, I actually want to, okay, to add a parameter, because here always in my my main app, okay, I will have a user repository. If you have authentication, you will always have that, right? So you have a user repository here, and you're just going to pass it here onto your main.dart, right? And you can't pass a user repository like this because it's an abstract class, okay? Abstract class, they can't be instantiated, but what can be instantiated is the Firebase user repository class, okay? And just like that, you have the architecture for, let's say, your main your main entry point, okay? Perfect. Let me comment that so we don't have errors. I don't like errors. Okay, so you have a main, an app.dart, and an appview.dart where you actually have your material app inside, okay? And then for the rest of your app, well, you have an architecture that I kind of like. It's an architecture where you have another folder right here that's called source, okay? And under this source folder, you have another folder that is called components, another folder that it's going to be called extensions, another one that will be called modules, and another one that's going to be called resources, okay? And under resources, perhaps you would have a new file that you will call colors.dart, and you will have all your colors under this. For the modules, we'll go on that later on. For the components, you would have, for instance, a new file that you would say my validation button.dart, and you create a validation button that's going to be common for different kind of screen, and you have them inside your components right here. Extensions that you would have, for instance, you can have like string extension, okay, str extension .dart, and here perhaps you want to create extension for capitalize later, right? I don't know, a string format. You do something like this, and it's putting the first letter capital, and you can access this string format throughout your app and use this first capital kind of getter to go around. So you would put all of your extension right here, and perhaps as well, depending on where you're living as well, you can have like integer time differences, dates. Perhaps we don't have the same dates and the same calendar, so you would have all of your extension right here. But by far the most important folder right here is the module folder, because it's where you would have all of your perhaps, let's say, screens. Yeah, screens of your app, okay? So if you want, you go ahead and we create, for instance, a new folder that we'll call auth for authentication. We can have a new folder that we'll call home, okay? And under those folders are actually the screens themselves, right? And under that, for example, for the auth, you want to have a new folder where you're going to have all your blocks for the authentication. You want to have a new folder where you have your components. You want to have a new folder where you have your views. And that's going to be the exact same thing for home, okay? You want to have those folder. Why? Because you want to have the blocks that are dedicated to the authentication right here, because you could create a block folder at the very top and shove all of your different blocks down there. But let me tell you, by experience, it gets very confusing because you have so many blocks, and sometimes the blocks are doing just a very specific task, but they're kind of heavy duty as well. You have event, a block, and a state, 3 files all the time that's inside a folder. So that's a lot, okay? If you have them separated, you know exactly in the authentication, you would have the sign-in block, the sign-up block. You would have as well the authentication block, that is the, the getter that tells if the user is signed in or not. You have as well another component folder, because you might have one here, but here you might want to have common widgets that are only going to be used onto the authentication. Let's say you have text fields, right? And you want to have the same decoration for the text fields onto the sign-in screen and the sign-up screen, but you have other text field inside your app that takes a different kind of UI. Well, you are going to create this common UI component inside this component under auth, and then you're going to use them inside your auth views, because here I'm going to have, for instance, I create a new file. I'm going to have the sign in screen.dart. Okay. And this is how I create basically all my apps now. Sometimes I'm gonna have here under source a block as well folder, because sometimes I have some blocks that are like, let's say, root of the application, right? And I don't specifically want them onto a specific modules because they're used in several different places, and perhaps I want to have them up there. You might want to shove up there as well, like common stuff. Okay, so and then you tweak it. The entire stuff with it, guys, is you make it as clear as possible for you. Okay, this is how I do it, and I'm by far not the reference in all this. It's just I find it over time and after building and spending hours and hours onto mobile development, that this is a very reliable method for developing apps, right? But then you make it your own. You're making it better, you're making it more efficient. You can do all sorts of things, but keep in mind really the separation from the backend with your UI, and in your UI the separation that you want to have. But also keep in mind that clean architecture is very cool when you have separations like this, but don't overdo it, because sometimes if you have a widget that is 500 lines long and you want to split it into different widgets, right? You are gonna perhaps make your life harder by trying to update the states in those new files that are separated than if it was in the same 500 line file. So there is a fine line to actually find, and that's really going to make your life more efficient. But if you are overdoing it, you might end up actually losing time. So yeah, that's how I do it. I hope you like it. Tell me in the comment section if you like this kind of architecture, if you would want to see other type of architecture. And yeah, for now I'm gonna leave you to it. Experiment with it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Leave a like if that really helped you, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.